So today on the Neil Wilkins podcast, I'm joined by Sani Abdul-Jabbar, who is an artificial intelligence and emerging technology thought leader. Now, who wouldn't want that on their podcast? Because this is going to be something a little bit philosophical, something a little bit kind of emerging technology focused, but also really practical. And this is the sense of the conversation right now. Is it is all very well hearing about these emerging technologies, but even as a thought leader, as we're going to hear from Sani, it requires us also to be practical. Sani is also a Forbes contributor, so who is better to understand how this whole market is playing out right now, and particularly in larger organizations who, for the rest of us, tend to be the ones where we can find best practice, we can find the opportunities, and we can then start to translate those for ourselves. So no matter whether you're a small business, large business, big enterprise, thought leader, influencer, whatever your role here, Sani has got something for you, and we're going to enable you to connect with Sani at the end of this particular conversation. So welcome to the podcast, Sani.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. So excited.
Well, it's a kind of a big build up there, isn't it? The way I've kind of sort of positioned you there, it is something that sort of says, hey, Sani knows the answer. Because I think a lot of people are kind of waiting, so almost playing a waiting game and kind of trying to cut through all this hype and all this media expectation of what is possible, and actually understand, no, seriously here, what actually is possible. So I'm guessing part of your role as a Forbes contributor, as a thought leader, is to strip away a lot of this hype and get to what is actually really practical here, both strategically and tactically. So what are you seeing? Where are the key themes, and what should we be really thinking about?
So first of all, thank you for the that massive introduction. I'll try to live up to that scale. You said a word. You said people are waiting, and that's the key word. We invest in data collection and market surveys every year to get a pulse of the market, because emerging tech is a very rapidly shifting marketplace. So we have to keep an eye on what's going on, what's in demand, what's hype, what's actually working, and all that. We found out in our recent survey that there are 78%, little over 78% business leaders that we surveyed. They said they understand that emerging tech, AI, blockchain, Web3, all that is the competitive advantage of the near future. And within the next 10 years, they understand that if they don't have this competitive advantage, they will not survive within this decade, not 10 years, I misspoke, within this decade. So 6 years remaining, right? When we ask them how many of them are actually taking practical actions and investing in bringing Web3 and emerging tech into their industries, guess what? Less than 4%, not even full 4%. So why the huge discrepancy, 4% versus over 78%? And the answer is what you kind of touched upon, the wait. It's the wait. Let's see what the others are doing. And why wait? Why the wait and see policy? Because of the fear. Because there's not enough information in the market. There's not enough experts who can lead the conversations. One of the big four consulting firms. So usually when there's a paradigm shift of this sort, where a complete reality is shifting, technology is not evolving, but like a complete new paradigm is coming in the conversation. Corporations tend to gravitate towards consulting firms and expect the consulting firms to lead the conversation and guide them sort of how to move forward. I recently spoke with a very large consulting firm and asked them this question: what are they doing in the AI space? And we were having conversation around this 4% versus 78% discrepancy. And they said, yes, we're seeing the same thing. So I said, well, usually corporations and leaders looked towards you for guidance. You're one of the large consulting firms, global. And they said, yeah, we are working on AI projects. I said, what kind of AI projects? I said, do you have some case studies? They gave me a few case studies. Majority of them were, we are studying X. We are studying how to use this technology in this industry. So these were study projects and R&D type projects, not necessarily implementation projects. Again, it supports that the data that we collected, a very large number is considering it, very small number is actually doing it. And when you go a little bit deeper, people who say we are actually doing it, less than 4%, what does that mean? Turned out they're created. So when they say we are actually working on bringing emerging tech into our companies, in some cases, that meant we have a person that we have declared as AI advocate. That's a new title that I came across recently, AI advocate. And this person's job basically in reality is just to keep an eye on the market, see what the competitors are doing, what new tools are coming into market, and see where the opportunities are. So again, that less than 4%, even less than 4% who are saying, yes, we are bringing AI into our business, people who are tangibly doing it and making significant investments, they are even a much smaller number. Now that model, that speed is not going to work because the change is rapid. It's not like, well, I will bring a little bit of technology and see what happens. I will bring a little bit, because this is a paradigm shift. It's not evolution. Usually technology evolves. You look at computers. Yes, computers were invented at one point, but from that point forward, it's just throw in more RAM, throw in more memory, throw in more processing power, until you get to a point where, we're going from traditional computers to, say, quantum computing. That's evolution. And that's not, sorry, that's revolution, not evolution. But most until now, from the invention of computers, evolution. AI is revolution. So when revolution happens, it's not like, well, I'll take a little bit. You have to really, go deep into it. So what's happening now is that industries are disappearing, jobs are disappearing, new jobs, new industries are being created. There is a lot of fear in the market. So on the one side is, well, I don't know if I bring AI into my company, it may interrupt my ongoing processes, and that may cause disruption. That's potentially bad for business. A lot of leaders in the larger organizations, the mindset is, this quarter, the earnings for this quarter, the next quarter, how is it going to make me look like if the earnings go down? This is a capital investment. How do I justify that? So I know I'm giving you a very long-winded answer, but it is, like you said earlier, the role of people like me has gone from just technology to now teachers and philosophical and even ethical. I wrote a book on this subject. We can talk more about it later. Ethics of these sort of technologies and business, because it can give you potentially an unfair advantage. How are you going to use that unfair advantage, right? So ethics come into play. So there's a lot of philosophical and ethical and social impact conversations have become now part of technology conversations, which wasn't the case until recently. So I'll stop at that. And I know I've gone in too many different directions, but I'll let you choose. How do you like to move forward?
So you have and you haven't, because I think for me, what I've taken away from that is that, we've never really, and again, challenge me on this one if you don't think I've got this quite right, but it doesn't feel like we've ever really been here before. I know there is no real playbook on AI, for example, when we're talking Web3 here and all its various guises, but there is currently no real playbook, so we are making this up as we go. Whereas if you think back at, the dawn of social media, for example, there kind of was a playbook. All right, there were new platforms coming into play, but we kind of knew what a community was because we'd had them in the real world. We kind of knew what it would be like to be on a forum as such, because those things had been around since, the early mid-90s. So when social media came, it was more of an evolution, and some of these clever platforms. And there was this thing at the time called Facebook, and you could put images on, and you could, so it felt like it was a little bit of an evolution, but we felt comfortable because it was sort of akin to something that we had experienced before. Am I right in thinking that a lot of this fear and a lot of this waiting game and a lot of this, those percentages are incredible. I had no idea it was so diverse, we're going to, but we're not going to yet, was so markedly different. So do you feel it's because it's not so much fear, it's just a lack of really understanding as to the how? We're not really sure quite how to take those early steps, because even though some people say, oh, I've got this great piece of technology that can solve this and this and that, even those are still often in beta stage. And so they're not really fully formed. The case studies aren't really there. And so it is a watching game because there's no playbook. So there isn't a confidence that if we were to jump in, we'd be making the right decisions because there's nothing really to compare it to, is there?
Very well said. So fear stems from, first of all, new or different is scary. Just that's how we are wired, most of us. So first is a new. It's new. It's different. It's not little bit evolution. It's revolution. It's not that you're just buying a more powerful computer. It's like totally different way of doing things. In the past, like until 2023, prompt engineering isn't one of the basic requirements for most jobs. So that has become now a basic requirement for most jobs, right? So it's a complete paradigm shift. That's one. Second is, like you said very eloquently, it's the lack of information. And when there's hype creates lots of self-proclaimed experts. And if you're not in the industry, if you don't know enough, which most people don't, we're writing the playbook, they don't know who to trust in the industry, right? And even when they go to, even if they have the resources to go to one of the larger consulting firms, I just shared with you the story, even the larger consulting firms are busy writing the playbook. They don't have the playbook. So there's a lot of uncharted territory. So there's that. Your example of social media, yes, we try to copy our behaviors from physical social interactions to digital social interactions, and there were some pros and cons of that, and we learned over the years that there were some negatives, some positives, some value, some not. And social media did have a massive impact on societies across the globe, but it's still nothing comparable to when it comes to AI. Because what's happening with AI is like, it's a superpower. Once you understand it, once you have those tools at your disposal, you acquire this new superpower. So what happens with superpower is that now it's on us. How do we use that superpower? AI is built on data. Web3 is built on data. With social, you are actually, the purpose of creating social platforms was to collect data. But AI doesn't work without data. Data comes from our past experiences and past behaviors and past decision-making, right? Now, have we always made good decisions as a society? Have we always made responsible decisions? Have we always made unbiased decisions? Decisions that aren't impacted by our explicit and implicit biases. So all that is currently existing in the data, right? So the challenge is that's another angle of fear that people who are aware of it and some aren't, is that if we start using this data, which may be highly flawed, which is highly likely, what's going to happen to my decision making going forward? And on more beyond just philosophy and morality, what happens on legal grounds, for example? If my piece of AI starts making decisions that are legally problematic, I get in trouble. There aren't even enough regulations in place to protect me in situations like that. So when we talk to, there's a chain of auto dealerships here in the US. We had this conversation with them. We said we can actually bring in AI. They were exploring AI for the chain of these auto dealerships, car dealerships. And the idea was, can we use AI to somehow make their processes more efficient, use AI bots for initial conversations with potential buyers, give them prices and whatnot. And what happened is that a very smart potential buyer who came on their website started interacting with their chatbots, and it tricked the chatbot into saying that the price that the chatbot was presenting was legally binding price. And so he said that, and and this person actually made the chatbot to make very legal sounding statements that I am legally bound to now stand by this price. And the price was $1 for a Mercedes, for a brand new Mercedes. S-Class, I think. And now this person, so the person then takes that information, goes to the dealership, and is like, well, from your website, I spoke with somebody, I don't know who I was talking to, and they committed that you're legally bound to sell me this car for $1. Now, this person, he was just being silly. He didn't actually intend to buy the car for $1. Luckily, he was just pushing the limits and wanted to see what he can do, kind of like having fun and kind of pushing the limits. And but this is a scenario that can get pretty bad pretty fast when we don't know where to put the limits. Yes, we understand there's a need for guardrails, but where to put the guardrails? Who can be trusted, who can't? The way AI is evolving now, it's writing some of its own rules. It's writing some of its own code based on how it learns, right? And there are humans who either nefariously or just for fun or just to make a point, they would push the limits. So what happens there? And that exposes corporations and organizations to liability. That's another angle of fear, why they are hesitant. We can go deeper in solution, but one sentence I would, one comment I would make on the solution side, how to deal with these problems is, one, AI should not be seen as a replacement of human decision makers. It should be seen as an addition, as a tool at their disposal. That's one. Two, as we're learning from AI, we need to take active actions in putting those guardrails in place. Right, and there are many other things that can be done, but these are one of the first few. First of all, like looking at it as a tool, not a replacement. Some organizations are making the mistake of seeing it as replacement. I came across an organization that fired about 80% of their sales teams, because now they have automated chatbots that can interact with the visitors on their website or even callers, very human sounding bots, but an unintended side effect of that outcome of that could be the auto dealership story that I shared with you. So evolving, writing the book, indeed.
So if anybody was a little fearful before that story, they're now sort of sat there thinking, no, I'm never going to do this. Yeah. But it's nice that there are kind of other considerations. If you're feeling even more fearful now because of Sani's example there, and honestly, I mean, that is just, there's always somebody very smart out there who's going to use the system to really test things. And of course, science has always been based on that, hasn't it? There's a hypothesis. Right now we need to test it and try and break it to show it's true. And of course, what this is going to be doing is people like that example, they're going to be creating and helping us to create the regulations, the legislation, the user studies that show what you should and shouldn't do. So with those, and I love the analogy there, the guardrails around this. I think it's so important that we kind of understand that at the moment they are very, very broad, and we need to kind of bring them in a little bit tighter, possibly, just to kind of protect ourselves. When we sort of, think about the current sort of emerging technologies, to use a very general phrase, do you think at the moment we're kind of missing a trick with some of the other stuff that's happening kind of almost now, probably in the shadows of AI, because ChatGPT and others are available, have kind of taken the limelight of our attention? But there's still things like VR that are coming in. There's metaverse. There's, big data is still a thing. I mean, It really is. I mean, a lot of organizations are only now just really starting to see the benefit of that. Do you think there's, from a competitive angle, businesses of any size can be maybe looking at not getting just swept along by the ChatGPTs of this world, but looking at some of the other emerging tech? And if so, why would they start with that? Are there kind of some early winners there that might be enabling us to not just have to wait, but we can actually start now?
That's an excellent question, which is often not asked. So thank you for asking this question. AI is one piece of the bigger picture. Data, you mentioned big data. Big data used to be, or data in general used to be, a sideshow. It's not anymore. That is the main show. Right, ChatGPT, in my opinion, it's a sliver of what emerging technologies can offer in the future. But what ChatGPT and tools like that have done is it has brought AI and emerging tech conversations in living rooms. In the past, it was only among us nerds. Right now, everyone is talking about it, People think before 2022, AI didn't exist. One of our largest AI powered project was in 2015, way before ChatGPT. And I know many of my peers who've been working in this industry for a long time on working on things like AI and others. But data is certainly a big deal now. In the past it used to be, it's something we have to deal with. It was like a, like I said, sideshow. It's not anymore. Every conversation around AI and emerging tech starts with data. Now, ChatGPT is not a competitive advantage. You and I both have access to ChatGPT. We both can use it. So if something is available to both you and I, neither of us can claim a competitive advantage. Many other AI tools, there are really well-crafted tools to do social media management, for example, for businesses, or video editing. And I'm not talking about Hollywood scale. I'm talking about small to mid-sized business scale. And some of the larger organizations too. You throw this conversation in a tool like Opus, for example. In a moment, if you haven't played with it, I highly recommend it. I have no vested interest. It's just a tool that I like. It'll give you, several clips that you can share across social media, like in less than a minute. This used to take quite a bit of time and effort and cost to do in the past. That's one example. But this tool is available to both you and I, so it's not a competitive advantage. What is it that's available only to you or to me that's proprietary and that gives us competitive advantage? That's the data. For instance, if you could create a Neil.ai that's based on your education, your background, your observations, your experience, all of that, and then going forward, you can use that tool to, say, provide your consulting services or your podcasting related services or anything, or education related services, anything that you do, you could have this tool do it on your behalf while you're watching it, while you're doing the quality control. Now imagine your output, it just magnifies all of a sudden, exponentially. What if I have actually done it already. So I wrote a book called Makers on AI. It's about AI and the evolution of AI in the future. I was getting interview requests and writing requests and all sorts of things. I just didn't have time to address all of those. So I created something called Makers.ai, which is based on my book and based on the characters in the book. Now, my staff can actually ask this it's a ChatGPT based tool. It's a custom GPT. They can ask this tool a question and they can get the answer, and the answer would sound like a character in the book responding, or I am responding, and it's strictly based on my information that I uploaded. It's not, so you restrict it and you say, only look at these sources that I'm providing you, and the sources are my writings, my speeches, my, everything that I have generated. So now my output, my ability to answer those questions has exponentially increased. That's the competitive advantage. Competitive advantage comes from your proprietary data, not from the publicly available tools. Now, one could argue that there are tools that one organization may be able to afford and other may not be able to afford, but still, if it's a publicly available tool, anyone who can pay for it, it's available to them, so it's not competitive. We had a meeting at, I signed the NDA, so I can't mention the names, a very large company that builds software for very large organizations. Let's just leave it at that. They presented some of the tools they created, AI-powered tools for the entertainment industry, Hollywood film studios. You look at these tools and you go like, wow, you can create characters, you can create sounds, voices, scenes, environments, everything, either by providing written instructions, prompt writing, or by uploading. You can upload, for example, a photograph of your room right now, and you can say, make me an hour-long movie, and for that, create the environments based on this photograph. That is just one angle, right? But it will create a whole environment. It will expand that photograph into multiple environments. And you can say, okay, well, I'm sitting in my home office, but take me to the kitchen as well. And it will create the kitchen, which will be consistent with with what you gave it and all that. So you look at these things and you go like, wow, this is the future. So if you are, I'm just using film industry as an example because Hollywood is down the street from where I am right now. It's a massive, massive paradigm shift. Anyone who is involved in that industry, from writers to filmmakers to actors to sound people, and then the supporting industries, from little restaurants and cafes around the studios, like everyone is getting impacted. I'm not presenting these scenarios as a fear tactic. That's not my intent. My intent is that when technology was evolving, we were going through evolution of different types of technologies over the years. We could say that, okay, I'm going to wait. I'll see what happens. Then maybe we'll adopt something. Maybe we'll buy new software and new subscription and whatnot. But now the change is not that slow. Change is breakneck speed. And it's impacting a very wide spectrum of the society and industry. So if the decisions aren't made today to significantly invest into and adopt these technologies, then that competitive advantage is gone. There's a major opportunity cost there for organizations. And to your earlier statement about where the fear comes from lack of knowledge, of course, lack of guidance, and also that it's new. And the solution is just finding people who are learning these technologies and who are offering services and guidance in these technologies, and yourself, educating yourself, no matter what you do, no matter what position you're in. I guarantee you, beyond people who work with the hands, your electricians and plumbers and those kind of skills. Beyond that, especially in the in the developed world, most of us, we are knowledge workers. And I can guarantee you that any knowledge work job is going to get impacted. So saying that I'm going to wait and see, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. This is, I can just picture in my head now, and I'm sure anybody listening to this can just picture that kind of video stroke Hollywood scenario and just think, wow, if there's that many people in that simple single example being impacted, is this where our whole kind of ethical conversation needs to begin? Because just because we can with these emerging technologies, does that mean we should? I guess there's a real fundamental question here, isn't there, that says, okay, we could create this full-length, feature-length movie. In fact, let's make it a trilogy. So, over a period of, say, 3 or 4 years between the first release and the second release, going out in all the kind of movie theaters, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a huge period of time, probably thousands of people being impacted. And yet I can sit here using that piece of technology and create it from my own bedroom, going tap, 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 tap on my computer. And I can create exactly that, just little me. There's a real kind of ethical thing from a human perspective. I know we're talking extreme example here, but that often is the one that's most interesting, because then we can scale it back down to our local level. Well, what are your kind of feelings on the kind of the impact on human, really, with these kinds of technologies? Because just because we can doesn't mean necessarily we should, but then it goes full circle to say, yeah, but we can. So that competitive angle is always from a commercial angle. Capitalist society, that's always going to come into play, isn't it? This is complicated stuff. What is your view on the ethics behind that?
If we can, should we, that implies we have the option to not doing something, right? We don't. Because at this point, if I can gain competitive advantage by using these technologies, how would you convince me that I shouldn't? Because capitalistic societies are built on the idea of unfair advantage in any business. And I'm not saying unfair advantage with any negative connotation. In the business world, we call it competitive advantage, but that's, in some cases, in many cases, that is unfair advantage. If I have access to amounts of data that you don't, and we are competitors, I have unfair advantage over you, right? So this is celebrated. It's not something that, now, if we were living in a society that prioritizes social good over economic empowerment and prosperity, then possibly we could put some limits on it. But then if that happens, the difference between haves and have-nots is only gonna expand. You will have societies and countries. There are countries, by the way, who are putting limits and applying some brakes to the evolution of these technologies. What's happening? Those whole societies and countries are going to get left behind compared to the other societies and countries which are moving much faster. Well, let's use EU, China, and the US as examples. China is pretty open when it comes to building emerging technologies. Their capabilities in microchip, for example, way ahead of the rest of the world. They're some of the large language models that are coming out of China, much larger, much more powerful than what's being created in the US. In the US, there are talks around putting some guardrails, putting some limitations, some regulations. There are talks. I know that there are lobbying groups in Washington who are trying to influence policy, but it's in very early stage. EU has already put some guardrails in place in the evolution of emerging technologies, which has some benefits for the society, but also it hinders some of the progress and competitive ability of that region. So yes, we can limit the evolution to a degree, but at what cost? That would be a big question. And the cost is not at this point now we're talking about societies and countries. We're not talking about individuals and small organizations. This is a widespread sort of a technology that has widespread impact on every aspect of business and society. So where are we going to put those limits? In my opinion, this is a genie that's out of the bottle now. So what we can do is, in my very strong opinion, by the way, and I've been advocating this almost at every platform where I've gotten the ability to speak in recent months and years, is that working with this technology, evolving this technology a bit more mindfully, with more attention to the social impact, the moral impact, the values. The book that I mentioned earlier that I wrote, Makers, the whole book is based on I'll give you a little background where the book came from. A few years ago, when I would bring up AI in any environment, in any situation, the most common response from people was, "Oh, the Terminator scenario. Robots going to take over the world." That, like, real fear. First, I took it as a joke. I was like, yeah, people are just being funny. But then I really started thinking about it, that yes, this is a possible scenario. And then Hollywood keeps reinforcing that idea that robots are going to take over the world. So I said, okay, well, how do we create a different reality? Is it possible that robots and AI don't take over the world? And in order to do that, in order to achieve that reality, what would need to be done? I started asking this question, and my question was, what can we do today so that AI wouldn't become Terminator-like entity in 20 years from today? And the reason why I use 20 years timeline is just looking at the evolution of technology, and there was a belief that it would take about 20 years to get to an AGI, artificial general intelligence state, where AI can start thinking for itself. That timeline, by the way, has now shrunk quite a bit after COVID. COVID made technology evolution much faster than it was before. People became a whole lot more comfortable working across the planet over these digital means, like we are talking right now, and many other reasons. So the question was, what do we do today so that technology doesn't become counterproductive 20 years from today? I asked this question to people from many different backgrounds, many different walks of life, from theology to philosophy to technology to PhDs from Caltech. And one response that I received from one of these gentlemen really stood out for me. He said, well, if you don't want your kids to do stupid things 20 years from today, what would you do today? I said, well, you try to give them good values today so that they don't become bad humans 20 years from today. He said, how do you train your AI? And I explained to him, how do we train AI? He's like, that sounds like you train AI the way you raise your kids. You expose it to different scenarios, you provide different types of data, and you put some principles in place, and that's how you raise your kids. So yeah, I see that there is some similarity there. It's like that's the answer. You have to teach AI the values, human values, that prevents us from, acting in evil, less frequently acting in evil manner than not. There are fewer people in the world who want to destroy the world than people who don't want that, right? There are more probably good people than bad people, and that's how the world works. It's like that's exactly what you need to do with AI. Teach good values. So the whole book is that I wrote. It's about human values: kindness, compassion, empathy, that sort of stuff. And I think that's the answer. The answer is not limiting the evolution of technology going forward. Revolution has happened. Now it's the evolution of AI going forward, right? And in that process of evolution, I think it's giving those values, teaching AI in a manner that's not counterproductive, that's not disastrous down the road, be it job security or defense or law and order, whatever that might be, whatever area of society we're talking about. It's not, I don't think limiting the evolution is the solution, but evolving in a more mindful way probably is the answer.
It feels like that's such a pragmatic approach, because I think, if for some of us we're thinking, yes, but, wouldn't it be lovely to change the whole system such that we could still be, capitalist, and we could still be generating profit, but mindful profit, the right kind of profit. We're all purpose driven. And actually doing everything with good intent. But of course, that is it's almost a myth, really, that ever, with human beings involved, that ever could be possible. But I think what you've described there feels very much more pragmatic. It is based on values. It is based on, good ethical principles, but it kind of meets capitalist approaches and the need to make profit, because that is how we judge success right now. But it meets it kind of head on, but then it works together. So the two things are working together in alignment with, as you've described it, your IP, which is the data that you've created from the knowledge that you have, either as an individual or as a business. So these three things then are kind of working almost symbiotically with each other, so that you get the best of all worlds then, don't you? You get the technology and all its incredible enabling things. You get to use the USP that you have, which is you personally or as an organization, but you're doing it in a wholesome, ethical, authentic way as well. So you can still make profit, you can still get the automation benefits, but it's the right kind of balance. So is it about balance here? Because this is neither one thing or another at 100%, is it? It feels like it's almost this sort of perfect scenario where everything is, in balance. There is an equilibrium here. We're going at the right kind of pace, but we're doing it in the right way. So is balance that key word that I think people are missing?
Absolutely. So I'll give you an example of from the social media world. So in the social media world in the past, we could collect all sorts of data. There was a time, actually, I could run an ad on social media that only you would see, only one person. I could do that. Very targeted advertising, because using an individual's data to locate them, to display the ad to them, to track their behavior, all of that was okay. It was allowed, it was legal. Then we realized that that's a bad idea. Real story, I know someone who actually said, I want to propose to my now wife, back then girlfriend, I want to propose to her via a Facebook ad. And we helped them create a Facebook ad. This was just, for fun, like no vested interest. But we created a Facebook ad that only that lady would see. And she saw the ad and she saw the proposal, and the rest is history. But that was possible. Then we realized that actually it's a bad idea if we can track people and target people that narrowly. That can have many negative implications, from not just from trying to trick them into buying stuff, but also political and social and other things. So then laws were made that you cannot individually target people, but you can look at aggregate data. That's okay. I think that's what's going to happen going forward with AI as well, or needs to be done at least, where we need to come up with rules and regulations and principles, industry standards, which, in order to create a balance between that ideal situation, which we talked about earlier, and also a practical scenario. So the right answer is somewhere in the middle, and in order to reach that right answer, my concern at this point, and I don't have the answer to this one, I'm just going to raise a question for people to think, and maybe someone can come up with the answer, is that I mentioned that AI needs to be built on values. The fact is, all AI is being built on values, someone's values. Is it, Dalai Lama's values, or is it, some dictator's values? That's a different question. So how do we create a value system that's globally acceptable to some degree? And who is then going to be the watchdog, and who is going to watch the watchmen? That I don't have the answer to that. Right now, we are pretty much depending on the morals and values and ethics of the developers and builders of these tools. But I'm not aware of any organization with authority to make sure that there is some quality checks and some guardrails are being put in place. It might be a UN level entity. It might be a industry level entity. I don't know yet. But I think something like that needs to happen to make sure. Right now, countries are making rules, and these rules are very hush-hush of different situations. US, I mentioned the example of US, China, and EU earlier, but there's no consistency to the best of my knowledge. Everyone is trying to do the best they can. I had a conversation with someone in the leader of a lobbying group in the US, in Washington, and they are writing advice for the lawmakers and helping them create rules that are going to impact AI in a specific part of the government, how to use AI and how to put it properly. But when I talk to these people, I was quite shocked to see how limited their own knowledge of these technologies was. So that's the challenge. There is no central body yet. There is no entity with enough authority and enough knowledge to do that quality control. I think that's what needs to be done in order to move forward, and in a way that's balanced between the prosperity and the principles and values extremes.
And what a wonderful way to round up our conversation here with that kind of really pertinent question, which we simply don't have the answer because there is no playbook yet. But I have no doubt whatsoever, Sani, that you are going to be at the heart of the debate just by the way you've kind of educated us and informed us today. I want to keep people connected with you, either if they are a decision maker, so they might be a senior leader and they need to kind of introduce this kind of thinking into their organization, or they're not, but they do have a way of introducing you and some of this information into their organizations. How best should people connect with you and follow your work and your thought leadership?
The best way to connect with me is LinkedIn, just my last name, linkedin.com/Sani, SANI. And I share quite a bit of content and my thoughts on the evolution of AI quite frequently. So that would be the best way to connect with me and just keep an eye on what's going on in the industry.
Wonderful. This is, I love talking. You might have gathered, I love talking about the kind of the future sort of enablement of this stuff. I mean, to me, it's just a fascinating kind of philosophical debate. I get lost in the tech because I'm not that techie, but I kind of am, but I'm not. But this kind of thinking where it's just like, it almost hurts your mind just thinking about the possibilities, but balanced with the pragmatic kind of sensibility of being human and being, doing the right thing. It's just, for me, it's a fascinating conversation. So I'm so glad you've given me so much to think about, and I'm sure everybody else's minds are reeling from some of these ideas here, Sani. So thank you so much. I know you've got a really busy day kind of ahead of you, so I'm going to let you go, and thank you so much for your time and
it's been a pleasure. Thank you for asking really, really well-crafted questions. Those were you made me think, let's put it that way.
Wonderful. Yeah, like minds. Yeah. That's great. Thank you.